There is a rider on a $500 steel bike from the 1980s who will drop you. There is also an ugly truth about what that bike cannot do, and it has nothing to do with speed. By the end, you will know which one you should buy. And here is the part that is going to annoy both sides of this argument straight away. In the fight between vintage steel and modern carbon, the frame is the least important part of the argument. It is the thing everybody argues about, and it is the thing that changes the least. The real gap between those two bikes is not the tubes. It is 4 other things bolted to the tubes, and once you can see them, you cannot unsee them, and you stop overpaying in both directions. Start with how we got here, because the history is not what most people think. Steel did not lose a fair fight. The last man to win the Tour de France on a steel frame was Miguel Indurain in 1994, on a TIG-welded Pinarello built with Oria tubing, a bike widely reported to have come from the hands of Dario Pegoretti, and it weighed somewhere around 9 kilos. That is the top of the sport. That is the absolute peak of what steel could do with a professional team's money behind it. Now put a number on the ordinary version of that. A good mid-80s Italian race bike built with Columbus tubing and full Campagnolo came in around 19 pounds. A late 80s British bike built with Reynolds 531 Professional came in around 21 pounds. The frames themselves, measured bare, ran roughly 2.5 to 2.85 kilos. Hold that number because here is the other side. A current specialized Tarmac SL8 frame is 685 grams. Their Aethos frame is 585 grams. So the frame that won Grand Tours weighs about 4 times what a good modern frame weighs today. That sounds decisive. It is not. Watch what happens when you actually do the maths on it. Here is the first ugly truth, and it belongs to the carbon side. You did not buy comfort. You bought tires. The story every carbon frame is sold on is compliance. The idea that the layup and the shaped seat stays soak up the road so you arrive fresher. When researchers actually tested this with riders on real bikes, the only things riders could reliably detect were tire pressure and seat post type. Frame design and frame construction could not be detected, and the reason is simple mechanics. In a suspension system, the softest spring dominates everything above it, and once you are on a 28 or a 32 millimeter tire, the softest spring in your bike is the tire by a mile, not the frame, not the material, the tire. Second, the aero story. A full aero package, frame and fork and post and bars, is credited with something in the region of 5 to 8 watts against round tubes for a mainstream aero frame, and that is measured at 40 kilometers an hour. 2 things about that. The frame is only somewhere around 5 to 10% of your total drag, because you are the rest of it, sitting up there like a sail. And drag scales with the square of speed, so if you ride at 30 or 32 rather than 40, that already modest saving shrinks hard. The math works beautifully for the pros. It does not work the same way for you. Third, the weight. Roughly 1 kilo off the total of bike plus rider is about 1% of your climbing time, which is about 34 seconds over a climb that takes you an hour. So a 2 kilo frame difference on a club ride with a couple of proper hills in it is worth seconds, not minutes. Seconds. And most of us are carrying more than 2 kilos of the wrong thing above the saddle anyway. And honestly, nobody at the shop is going to open that conversation with you. That is the half of the ugly truth the carbon crowd does not enjoy hearing. Quick thing before I turn on the other side, because the next half is the one that makes the steel crowd go very quiet. If you are getting something out of this, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps, and somehow the people who subscribe always seem to end up with the right bike for them rather than the most expensive one. Right. Steel. Here is the ugly truth, And it is not rust, and it is not weight. It is the gearing, and this is the single biggest real-world difference between these two bikes. Take a period race setup, a 42-tooth inner ring, and a 21-tooth sprocket at the back on a 700C wheel. That works out to roughly 52 gear inches as your easiest gear. Now take an ordinary modern compact, a 34-tooth ring and a 34-tooth sprocket, same wheel. That is roughly 26 gear inches, exactly half. Your bottom gear on that beautiful old bike is twice as hard as your bottom gear on a bike you can buy today for under $2,000. That is not nostalgia, and it is not marketing. That is your knees on a 12% ramp with 80 kilometers already in your legs. Those bikes were geared for professionals who were racing them, and the pros of that era walked up some of those gradients too. If you are riding real mountains, or you have crossed 60, or your knees have opinions, that number is the whole argument and everything else is decoration. Second, braking. Testing has put disc brakes at up to around 30% shorter stopping distances in the wet, and rim brakes on a wet rim are a known weak point, the worst version of it being an old carbon rim in the rain. Now the honest counter, because I am not going to pretend here. On dry roads, a well-set-up period brake with a decent modern pad compound is fine. It is not a modern hydraulic, but it is fine, and plenty of riders live with that quite happily for decades. Discs also add weight and add complexity, and add a bleed job you will eventually have to pay for. But in a wet descent, there is no argument. Third, tires, and this is where I get to correct a slogan that both tribes repeat wrongly. You have been told wider tires are simply faster. That is not what the data says. Bicycle rolling resistance ran the same tire in 23, 25, 28, and 32 millimeter, and when they equalized all four to the same comfort level, the rolling resistance came out within 0.2 watts of each other. Nearly identical. So wider is not free speed. What wider actually buys you is comfort and grip, and the ability to run lower pressure without bottoming out. And that is worth real money on a long day. The problem is that a 1980s frame usually will not physically fit it. You are stuck near the narrow end of that range, and you cannot access the comfort. And remember what we established earlier. The tire is the only comfort system on the bike that actually works. So now the money. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting, because one brand lets you run the experiment with a single badge. Colnago still builds the Steelmaster today in Italy with their own tubes and their own lugged construction, and the frame kit starts at $3,181. Their Steel Novo starts at $6,409. Their C68 carbon bike is $11,774. Their Y1RS starts at $14,332. Same badge, same country, same company. And the steel one, the one they have never stopped making, is a fraction of the carbon flagship. Now flip it. On the used market, ordinary vintage Reynolds 531 bikes turn up from around 150 pounds, and a properly restored one with period-correct parts runs into the several hundreds and up, depending on the badge and the condition and the country you are standing in. So the entry point to steel is genuinely low, and that is real, and it is why the value hunters love it. And there is one thing the new bike genuinely gives you that the old one cannot. And I am not going to skip it just because it is inconvenient for the value argument. You get a warranty and you get somebody to shout at. That same Colnago steel frame comes with a 2-year statutory warranty and a 3rd year on top if you register it. Buy a 40-year-old bike from a stranger and there is no warranty, no support, no recourse, and no shop to walk into. That is worth real money to some people and nothing at all to others, and only you know which of those you are. If you cannot turn a hex key and you do not want to learn, the old bike is not the bargain it looks like on the listing, because every job on it becomes a labor bill. But here is the honesty beat, and it cuts both ways. Neither of these is an investment. A modern carbon bike loses a brutal chunk of its value the moment it leaves the shop. And a used vintage bike comes with no warranty, no support, and no recourse. Anyone selling you a bicycle as a store of value is selling you something. There are exceptions, and I will come back to those at the end, but as a rule, you are buying a machine to ride, not an asset. Now, the part that mechanics actually talk about when there is no customer in earshot, because it is not speed and it is not price. It is what happens when it goes wrong. Steel can be repaired. Somebody can cut a tube out and braze a new one in, and you get your bike back. A carbon frame that has taken a real impact can be professionally repaired. But a professional repair generally does not return it to the original stiffness of a new frame set. And the two materials age in completely different ways. Steel below its fatigue limit essentially does not fatigue, which is why a properly built frame with no manufacturing defect can last decades and decades. Carbon is not fatigued by mileage the way metal is. It genuinely resists that better. But it is vulnerable to impact damage that you cannot always see, which is why anyone who knows what they are doing inspects a carbon frame properly after any real crash, and the steel counter, honestly. The rust story is overplayed, but it is not fiction. The vast majority of steel frames never receive any internal rust proofing and last for many decades regardless. What actually kills them is standing water getting in through the seat tube and road salt. Light surface rust is cosmetic. Rust that is scaled and flaked has removed material and created stress risers, and that frame is done. So if you are buying an old steel bike, pull the seat post out and look inside with a light before you hand over any money. That 1/32 check is worth more than every opinion in the comments, mine included. Then there is parts. 5 and 6 speed freewheels, 1-inch threaded headsets, the exact seat post diameter. None of it is impossible. All of it is a phone call and a wait. And on a Sunday afternoon with a ride tomorrow, it is a genuine irritation. So here is my honest verdict, and it splits by who you actually are, not by which tribe you want to belong to. If you ride mostly flat or rolling roads, mostly in the dry, and what you want is a machine you can maintain yourself forever, buy the vintage steel. It is cheap, it is repairable, it will outlive you, and it is one of the few bikes on earth that gets more beautiful with use. If you ride real mountains, or you ride in the wet, or your knees have already sent you a letter, buy modern, and it is not close. And I want to be precise about why, because it is not the frame. It is the gearing and it is the brakes. Those two things, not the carbon. If you race, buy modern, but understand your gains are coming from the wheels and from your position on the bike, not from the tube material. And if you want both, there is an answer almost nobody names out loud. A modern steel frame, built with current tubing, with modern gearing and modern brakes on it. You get the ride and the repairability and the soul, and you get a bottom gear that does not punish you. It will not be the lightest bike on the ride. You now know exactly how much that costs you in seconds. One more thing that outranks all of it. A bike that fits you will beat a better bike that does not every single time in every material at every price. If you take one thing from this, take that one. Get fitted, then argue about tubes. Which brings me back to where I started. The frame is the least important part of this argument mechanically, and it is the most important part emotionally. And that is exactly why we all argue about the tubes instead of the gearing. Nobody has ever fallen in love with a cassette. So tell me below, steel, carbon, or titanium, and which flag is on your bars, because I know some of you will only ride Italian, And some of you will only ride Japanese, and I want to see that fight. And if I got a gear inch calculation wrong, the comments will tell me within about 4 minutes, and honestly, that is half the fun. Now, I said earlier that bicycles are not investments, and I meant it. But there is a short list that breaks that rule. A handful of vintage steel machines that the collectors and the lay row eco crowd have quietly pushed somewhere nobody expected. And if you have just decided steel is your answer, that list is the exact next thing you need to see before you buy anything. It is on the screen right now. Click it and I will see you in there.